You've got a dream to glorify God and make your mark on the world. Maybe you want to grow a business, start a ministry, or become a better servant leader. Whichever level in life you want to hit, I believe that God's calling all of us towards something greater than where we are now. So join me as I document my journey to learn how to grow an online ministry in ways that are effective, biblical, and aren't stuffed with complicated religious or business mumbo-jumbo. My name is Alec Kassan, and welcome to the Digital Ministry Mastermind Podcast. Hey, what is going on, current Christian family? So I needed to start this episode off a little bit differently than the previous ones because I was reviewing the last episode and I noticed in the beginning I kind of alluded to doing this like really awesome exercise that's going to totally change your perspective on goal setting and things like that. And when I listened to the episode, I realized, I didn't even do the exercise. So I wanted to start off by apologizing for not going into that, because I didn't realize as I was coming off the material that exercise is a whole different episode in and of itself. And that's what this episode is going to be about. You know, we're trying to define success in our life and our ministry. And the previous episode, you know, is not, it doesn't, like, I don't want to make it sound like don't listen to it. I highly recommend you do listen to it before listening to this one, because this episode, we are going to be very focused on defining the end goal. But in order to lay out the path to get to where you want to go, you got to know where you're currently at. And the previous episode definitely goes into a lot of depth into that part. So for this episode, while we're on the topic of journeys, I wanted to start it off by sharing a short story about this really unexpected moment that I had with my wife in my car. So the other day I was in the car with my wife and we were actually driving to the birthday party of a student of mine who's in my youth group at church. And while we were in the car, and there was this moment of silence where neither of us were talking, like a conversation came into my mind. And the thought that sprouted up was about how annoyed I get when people aren't considerate about the comfort levels of those who are around them. And very specifically with COVID, because, you know, some people are very super sensitive about the COVID pandemic topic. And then other people are totally oblivious to it. Sorry, I couldn't think of a more sensitive word to that, but, you know, there's those polar extremes. And, you know, even though some people might not feel afraid or anxious about COVID, it doesn't mean that everyone feels the same way about it. And that idea gets me very annoyed, you know, when people aren't considerate about the comfort levels of others. But before I got to share that thought, another thought came to mind, and it forced me to put the brakes on what I was about to say. Now, the second thought was a question, actually, and that question was, would you rather start a conversation on a negative note or a positive one? And then I realized, you know, if I started that conversation on a note of annoyance and frustration, then it would just lead to my wife and I talking about how frustrated we are about different things. So instead of saying my original thought, I decided to say, hey, babe, you know what's really awesome? When people are considerate of the comfort levels of others, you know, especially when it comes to how comfortable other people are about the severity of COVID. And it was really cool because this really tiny shift in our dialogue allowed for us to continue to share about the things that we are thankful for and grateful for, whether it's, you know, friends, family, or material things. And, you know, you're probably wondering, Alec, what's the point of this story? Well, the point of it is that where our focus goes, our energy flows. And I didn't come up with that. I heard it from somewhere and I can't recall where, but it sounds really cool and it rhymes. So that means it's true. Now it kind of reminds me of the time in the Bible when a man asked Jesus what the most important law in the Old Testament was. And Jesus said it's to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself, you know, the golden rule. Then the man asked, well, who is my neighbor? You can begin to see this man isn't asking who's my neighbor out of a loving and growing heart. No, he wanted to know who his neighbor was so that he could understand what the bare minimum was that's expected. So he didn't want to expand who he loved, he just wanted to narrow it down to very specific few. Now, this man was focused on not loving a lot of people, and therefore was likely to not experience a lot of love in his own life or his own relationships, especially, with his relationship with God. Whereas Jesus, he wanted to expand his love, and he got to experience more love than, we can probably even imagine. And in your life, in your ministry, your relationships, finances, health, anything, if your focus is on the wrong thing, you won't get that right outcome. And if your focus is on the bare minimum, then you'll get, bare minimum in return. Now, again, I'm going to go back to that GPS analogy that I'm sure you guys have heard before. And if you listened to the last episode, you probably heard it there too. But you don't plug in to a GPS all the places that you don't want to go. You simply just tell the GPS the destination that you want. And as a result, it tells you which direction will bring you there, So my hope is that by the end of this episode, you'll not only intellectually know where to put your focus, but emotionally, you're going to understand the importance of it and apply it consistently in your life, or in your work, ministry, health, finances, relationships, everything, all that stuff. And again, what I'm about to say, these things, they might be stuff that you've heard before, or maybe you've heard similar things before, but if you've heard it and you aren't doing it, then it's basically the same as never having heard it at all, So if you're starting to think that, this might just be, some goal setting system or something like that, what I'm going to share is way more effective than anything you've probably done before. And it's super simple because we all lead crazy lives, and clearly none of us, can predict the future, especially, for example, when something like COVID hit. So doing an exercise where it's oh, where do you want to be in a year from now? It's just, you can only get so much out of that. And when something comes out of the blue, like a pandemic or an unexpected bill, having a goal written out is nothing when compared to the daunting tasks or details that we are focused on in our present. So I want to help get you out of that garbage of today. There's a lot of stuff that we are focused on today. And I just for a moment here, I just want to kind of pluck you right out of our daily grind and the mundane tasks just for a moment. That way, we can really embrace this exercise and this awesome thing that's going to be produced after we go through it. So before I start, I really, really, really want to emphasize that you really should write out your answer, or at least record yourself saying your answer on your phone. Because, once we start, I promise you that you're going to start feeling super excited and inspired and energetic. And you'll just be wishing oh crap, I should have wrote it down in that moment. I've had that a bunch. Do not save it for later, because you're going to feel super amped right now. And I want you to capture it right now in this moment. All right. So you ready? You got that pen and paper? You got your phone ready on the voice recording app? You can just pause the podcast whenever you get that moment. All right, here we go. So this exercise is actually something that I've learned from Dean Graziosi. He's got a lot of really cool content out there. And he learned this from one of his mentors, which is pretty cool. So it's kind of being passed down. So you may have heard him share this exercise, and if so, great. But, let's really dig into actually doing it together. Now, instead of me asking you to write out where you want to be a year from now, I want you to picture that a year has already passed. So imagine that it's a year from now, and looking back, you see that, wow, this has been the best year of my life. It's been such a great, fantastic year that even just thinking of it, is making you excited. It's kind of getting your heart rate up a little bit, and it's giving you this sense of thrill and joy just coming from within. Now I want you to ask yourself, looking back on that amazing year, what does that year look like? So I want you to write that out. Looking back on this fantastic year that has already happened, what does that year look like to you? Pause just for a moment and write out or record yourself answering that question. And maybe you're struggling a little bit. Come up with some answers or some ideas. And you can keep listening if so, until you get hit with that bolt of inspiration. And once you do, promise me you'll pause it and write out your answer and then come back and resume. But you can write out things that include, for example, like how much money you're making, or how much money you've saved, or maybe like how much money you've donated, while we're on that topic of money. How about like where you work? Maybe a year from now, like where do you work? Is it at home? Is it in a new office? Is your existing company or your ministry, is it being brought to that next level, or is it already there? Are you starting something new, or have you given up on an old thing that maybe is holding you back? Are you evolving what you currently have, or maybe your work relationships, are they getting any better? And speaking of relationships, maybe how's the relationship with your spouse, your significant other, family members, friends, your kids? What exactly does your life look like a year from now? And, I want you to, you're looking back, like what did that fantastic year look like for you? And what made it that way? Now, I know when I did this, I was feeling all types of emotions. It's getting a sense of freedom, sense of growth, excitement, and, lots of optimism. And you may feel those same things, or maybe even some other types of emotions. And I want you to know that it's okay to feel whatever it is that you're feeling. Let it all out. Do not hold back. Don't use any like coulds or shoulds, like, oh, well, if looking back in a year, I could have done this, or maybe I should, or, maybe, I don't want none of those. Write out your best year. Let all the good ideas just flow coming out of you, no holding back. So at this point, if you haven't written anything out, pause right now and do so, because now you should have written out your answer. And what's really cool is that not a lot of people take the time to both understand their current point in life. That's what we did in the last episode. And even fewer people try to fully picture where they want to go in life. And having both of these things is, it's just the beginning of this amazing journey that you're going to be going on this year. And it's just like that GPS. You have your current destination, and you've told it what that destination is. And I want you to remember that, following directions to a destination, it means you got to say no to making certain detours. You can't just be, oh, there's a right turn right there, I'm just going to do this right turn, recalculate, do a left turn. To make the proper turns in life, it requires saying no to a lot of other turns, if you catch my drift. Because just because, there's a guy in a cow outfit saying, oh, turn right for Chick-fil-A, doesn't mean you should be turning there if you want to get to your destination. And in real life, this might mean hanging out with certain friends less. It might mean watching less of certain shows. It might also mean you have to start doing things that you've neglected to do for a while. So either way, you are starting to take the next step towards that amazing year to come. And I'm just, oh man, it's going to be super awesome to see how God's going to be working in your life just by doing these few little things that we've talked about in the last episode and this episode. And the thing that's super awesome is that you're even closer to making an even bigger impact in the world and those around you. And hey, if you feel like you've learned some wisdom from this episode, then I would love for you to subscribe to the show to show your support if you haven't subscribed already. And maybe, hey, you are subscribed. Then I want to ask, hey, if you could, said a lot of hays there, if you could invite someone who you think would benefit from learning some of this kind of information, then please, I invite you to share this episode or any prior episodes with them. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you in our next episode. Are you a Christian leader looking to develop the skills needed to maximize the fruitfulness in your daily walk with Christ? Do you want to overcome the burden of not living life to the fullest and fully step into your God-given calling? If you do, then you should get a copy of my book, Planting Your Purpose, a 20-day guide to discover God's calling. It's not just another devotional book. Planting Your Purpose is your 20-day guide that will provide you with the strategies, tools, and insights to turn things around immediately. You will learn how to avoid the top 5 mistakes Christians make when pursuing their calling in life. You'll develop more joy in your walk with Jesus and unlock the secrets to mastering integrity. And by the end of 20 days, not only will you know your calling, but you'll have an even greater sense of fulfillment and confidence in your life. Everywhere, Christians are raving about this amazing new guide to discover their God-given calling. Get your copy by clicking the link in the show notes or by going to plantingyourpurpose.com. That's plantingyourpurpose.com.